You know that feeling when you encounter something that just, well, it doesn't quite fit. Maybe it's a detail in a story or a fact that kind of rattles your understanding of how things work. Well, today we're diving into science's greatest that's funny moments. The anomalies that challenge everything we thought we knew. We're looking at a stack of sources, but primarily drawing insights from the book 13 Things That Don't Make Sense to really unearth these scientific enigmas.
Indeed. And these aren't just inconvenient facts. They're more like cracks in our scientific paradigms, the places where our current understanding just hits its limits. But as history shows us, these moments of confusion, they're precisely where the most profound discoveries often emerge. It's like Isaac Asimov famously said, the most exciting phrase to hear in science is not Eureka, but that's funny.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack why these scientific enigmas aren't embarrassing problems. Not at all. They're actually our greatest opportunities for, well, a new state of knowledge. Our mission in this deep dive is to explore a selection of these baffling mysteries, understand why they defy current explanation, and maybe glimpse the potential paradigm shifts they might herald for you.
Right. It's about not feeling overwhelmed by all the information out there, but finding those moments in what's still unsolved. Because from the vastness of the cosmos to the tiny, intricate workings of our own cells, science is grappling with some really baffling mysteries. And we'll see how these anomalies are really pushing the boundaries of our understanding.
Okay, let's unpack this on the grandest scale possible then, the universe itself. For decades, cosmologists thought they had a pretty good handle on things, but then two massive anomalies have thrown a real wrench into that certainty: dark matter and dark energy.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how these huge problems emerge from seemingly simple observations. Take dark matter. Back in the 1930s, you had Fritz Zwicky observing the Coma cluster of galaxies. He saw stars way out on the edges of galaxies moving far too fast. I mean, way faster than the gravity from the visible matter should allow. His calculations suggested there had to be something like 400 times more mass than we could account for just by looking at the light.
Wow. So Zwicky saw these galaxies behaving in ways that just defied the visible mass, essentially implying this massive unseen gravitational influence. What made that idea so revolutionary, and why was it initially so difficult for the scientific community to accept back then?
Well, it was incredibly radical for the time. Zwicky was basically saying that the vast majority of matter in the universe was completely invisible to us, undetectable by any conventional means. It just went against the prevailing view that, well, what we saw was pretty much what there was. So for nearly 40 years, his insights were largely overlooked, just ignored. It really took Vera Rubin in the 1970s, an astronomer at Washington, D.C.'s Carnegie Institution, to sort of nail it down. She showed that the rotation curves of galaxies, how fast stars move at different distances from the center, they didn't fall off as expected further out. Instead, they just stayed flat, which suggested this massive halo of unseen matter extending far, far beyond the visible galaxy.
Okay, so this wasn't just a minor discrepancy in our cosmic inventory, was it? This sounds like a fundamental rethinking of what the universe is actually made of.
Oh, far from minor. When you put dark matter and dark energy together, they make up a staggering 96% of the universe. We can only actually see and interact with, like, 4% of the cosmos. It's like trying to understand an entire ocean by just observing the foam on the waves. It's that dramatic.
Right. And this leads us right into dark energy, where observations of distant supernovae back in 1997 revealed something truly astonishing. The universe isn't just expanding, its expansion is accelerating. I mean, that idea alone, that the cosmos is actively pushing itself apart faster and faster, that must have reshaped cosmology overnight.
It absolutely stunned cosmologists, completely floored them. Nobody knows why this acceleration is happening. All they can really say is some mysterious dark energy must be responsible for it. It was so unexpected that it kind of brought foundational theories, like string theory, to its knees, actually. Its proponents couldn't easily explain such a thing.
And doesn't this tie back to Einstein's infamous cosmological constant, something he added to his equations with, I think the quote is, profuse apologies?
That's right.
To stop the universe from expanding or contracting in his model. He called it his greatest blunder. But now
It's back.
Yeah.
But with a really profound twist. See the measured value of this vacuum energy, the thing driving the acceleration, from the supernovae data. It's incredibly tiny. Yet when theorists try to calculate it from quantum field theory, which is our best understanding of the subatomic world, they get a number that is just astronomically bigger. Too big by a factor of 10 to the power of 120?
Wait, 10 with 120 zeros after it?
Exactly, a mismatch with 120 zeros. It's known as the cosmological constant problem. And it's arguably, the most embarrassing mismatch between theory and experiment ever.
Okay, so some scientists are so floored by this mind-boggling discrepancy that they're suggesting our universe is just one of many, each with different characteristics. This idea of an anthropic landscape, it posits that things are the way they are simply because if they weren't, well, we wouldn't be here to observe them. That can feel a bit like giving up on finding a deeper explanation, can it? What's the core argument for its scientific validity, and what are the major criticisms that make some feel it sidesteps the real questions?
It's definitely a polarizing concept. The argument for its validity, well, it often comes from the sheer unlikelihood of our universe's parameters being so perfectly tuned for life. It seems too perfect. So if there are indeed, say, an infinite number of universes, then maybe it's not surprising that we just happen to find ourselves in one that supports our existence. It kind of offers a solution to the fine-tuning problem without needing, a designer or something. But the major criticism is exactly what you hinted at. It feels like an explanation that isn't really an explanation. It's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to actually test the existence of other universes, and it doesn't give us a predictive framework for why our universe has its specific constants. So, yeah, it might be true, but it doesn't offer the kind of falsifiable hypothesis that science usually thrives on.
Hmm. So, does this imply limits to science? Like Niels Bohr once suggested to Einstein that some things are just fundamentally beyond our grasp? Or is it, as our source material argues, actually the greatest opportunity in physics?
Oh, I think it absolutely represents a monumental opportunity. It really does. It's a chance to examine our oversimplifications, the assumptions we've made, and reach a new state of knowledge. Perhaps, as Adam Rees, he was one of the discoverers of the accelerating expansion, suggested, maybe we just don't know enough about how gravity works on these cosmic scales. Maybe we need to tweak Newton's laws. There's this idea called modified Newtonian dynamics, or MOND theory. It suggests gravity behaves differently at very low accelerations, which could potentially explain galactic rotation without needing all that dark matter. These anomalies, they're forcing us to confront the very foundations of our cosmic theories. It's exciting, really.
So, from galactic rotation to the very expansion of space, we're finding the fundamental forces might not be what we thought. But if the fabric of space itself is being stretched by dark energy, fundamentally altering gravity,
Yeah.
what if it's not just forces that are in flux? What if the very constants that underpin all our physical laws aren't actually constant? That feels like pulling the rug out from under reality.
It's a truly unsettling idea, isn't it? But also incredibly exciting from a physics perspective. There's a physicist in Australia, John Webb. He has compelling evidence that the fine structure constant, alpha, that's the number governing how light interacts with matter, might have been slightly smaller about 12 billion years ago. And more recently, there's evidence suggesting another constant, the ratio of proton mass to electron mass, called mu, was also different in the distant past.
Okay, wait. Alpha, the dimmer switch for light's interaction with matter. If that could have been different, does that mean our fundamental physical laws aren't universal across all time and space? What would that imply for, I don't know, our ability to truly understand the universe's earliest moments? Or even for the possibility of theory of everything?
That's exactly the crucial point. If these constants are dynamic, it's not just some minor tweak, it's a profound shift in thinking. It suggests physics itself might actually have a history, that the laws have evolved over cosmic time. Now, this could mean our universe is just one of many in a multiverse, like we discussed, each with slightly different fundamental settings. Or it could point towards entirely new, deeper physics, where these constants actually emerge from more fundamental dynamic fields we don't yet understand. It really challenges the bedrock assumption of an immutable cosmos. It opens up entirely new theoretical landscapes for physicists to explore. And Webb's team, they've rigorously checked the results. It's interesting, while initial data from the Oklo National Nuclear Reactor that's about 2 billion years old seemed to contradict him. Later analysis, I think in 2004, actually supported a varying alpha, suggesting the effect might be subtle or maybe even direction-dependent in the sky.
Wow. Okay, so are most fundamental physical laws potentially shifting? That's a truly cosmic level reevaluation. But sometimes these paradigm-shattering anomalies, they emerge from much humbler settings, right? Like a beaker in a lab. Which leads us to the equally controversial topic of cold fusion.
Ah, yes, cold
Yes.
fusion. It's a classic case of an anomaly-generating scandal, absolutely. And a fascinating look at how scientific orthodoxy can sometimes, well, push back hard.
Mhm.
Back in 1989, you had two electrochemists, Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons. They claimed they'd achieved nuclear fusion, actual fusion at room temperature, in a simple tabletop experiment. This, of course, flew in the face of all received wisdom in physics, which says you need extreme temperatures and pressures, like inside stars or huge tokamak reactors, for fusion to happen.
Right, I remember the initial reaction. It was this frantic race to replicate, wasn't it? Followed pretty quickly by derision. And for Pons and Fleischmann, sadly, it pretty much ruined their careers because nobody could consistently replicate the excess heat they claimed was the evidence.
That's largely correct. The scientific community, unable to reproduce the results reliably and, frankly, very skeptical of the claims, basically dismissed it.
Right.
Yet, the story isn't entirely over. It sort of lingered. The U.S. Navy, for example, quietly funded research into it for years. Then in 2004, a Department of Energy study actually admitted there might be something to the claims, recommending funding for well-designed proposals. Nowadays, researchers often talk about low-energy nuclear reactions, or LENR, rather than cold fusion.
Okay, so what's the actual distinction there? What are these low-energy nuclear reactions, and why are they still getting attention if they're not claiming that huge excess heat?
Yeah, that's the key difference. The original cold fusion claim was all about significant unexplained excess heat, potentially enough to be commercially viable power, which was the part never reliably reproduced. LENR, on the other hand, focuses more on detecting actual nuclear byproducts, things like neutrons or specific helium isotopes, maybe tritium, stuff that only occurs during nuclear reactions. Yeah. But crucially, without necessarily claiming that large, unexplained energy output, researchers are now using specialized detectors like CR39 chips, which they say provide almost incontestable evidence that nuclear reactions are involved within certain material lattices, like palladium soaked in heavy water. It's subtle, but it's a profound difference. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, under very specific, still poorly understood conditions, certain elements can undergo nuclear transformations at much lower energies than conventional physics would allow.
Huh. So nuclear energy without the drama and, the danger of conventional nuclear reactions, potentially opening up a new age of nuclear science, as the book puts it. It's a really fascinating example of how a scientific anomaly, even if it's initially dismissed or ridiculed, can just persist and eventually force a reevaluation.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is the reminder that science isn't ultimately about the personalities involved or the scandals. True anomalies, if they're real, they stand by themselves because they just don't go away. If a phenomenon can be reliably observed, even if it completely defies current theory, it demands an explanation. It's a testament to the persistent nature of unexplained stuff.
Okay, so from cosmic constants behaving weirdly to controversial reactions in a beaker. Let's move now to the utterly fundamental, life itself. It seems so obvious, right? But defining and understanding life, where it came from, that's still a massive scientific mystery.
Oh, definitely. We're still struggling to understand how inanimate matter, just chemicals, came to life, how that first spark of biological organization actually occurred. Experiments like Miller and Urey's back in 1953, they created amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, from simulating primordial gases. Those showed what might be possible. But even then, modern science has revealed flaws in their assumptions about what the early Earth's atmosphere was actually like.
But life got going on Earth astonishingly fast, didn't it? Once conditions allowed. Carl Sagan apparently took that as proof it can't be that hard to make, so why can't we just build it in a lab? I mean, we have brilliant people like Craig Venter trying to create a minimal genome bacterium, or scientists like Stein Rasmussen designing things like the Los Alamos bug, which is basically a self-replicating ball of soap. What are these efforts actually showing us, and what's the fundamental hurdle we keep hitting?
Well, these efforts in synthetic biology, they're incredibly valuable. They show us the mechanisms of life, how things work, and what's possible when we engineer biological systems. Venter's work, Rasmussen's models, they highlight the incredible complexity involved even in the simplest forms of self-replication we can imagine. However, they don't necessarily tell us what life is at its most fundamental level, or how it first appeared from non-living chemicals spontaneously. The underlying question is still there. Is life just a kind of fundamental emergent property of complex chemical systems? Something that inevitably happens under the right conditions? Or is there something truly special about it? A unique set of circumstances, or maybe a yet-to-be-discovered principle that allowed it to arise just here or maybe elsewhere? We can build the components, sure, but assembling them into true, spontaneous life from scratch remains elusive. We haven't crossed that threshold.
And then there's what the book calls the evolutionary scandal of death and sex. You mentioned Blanding's turtles, for instance, which don't seem to age and just keep reproducing for decades. Why do we die at all? And why sex? When asexual reproduction seems so much more efficient from a purely gene-passing perspective, these feel like paradoxes in evolution.
They absolutely are major puzzles. Evolution is supposed to select for individual fitness, right? For passing on your genes. From that viewpoint, death often seems counterproductive, making room for new generations. That sounds like group selection, a concept Richard Dawkins famously dismissed as wanton head-and-bag perversity.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, if an individual could live indefinitely and keep reproducing, why would evolution select for a programmed end? It's weird. And sex? Well, it has what biologists call a twofold cost. Only half your genes get passed on to each offspring, compared to asexual reproduction where you pass on everything. Plus, finding a mate is energetically expensive. It's risky. So why is sex so incredibly ubiquitous across the tree of life?
So what are the leading theories trying to unravel these deep evolutionary puzzles then? How do biologists try to make sense of it?
Well, for sex, the dominant idea is probably the Red Queen hypothesis. It's named after the character in Through the Looking Glass who has to run as fast as she can just to stay in the same place. The idea is that sex provides constant genetic variation, shuffling the deck each generation. And that variation is crucial in a constant coevolutionary arms race against rapidly evolving pathogens and parasites, bacteria, viruses, fungi. Without that constant genetic shuffling, a species might become an easy target for disease and just get wiped out. So sex keeps you one step ahead, or at least not falling behind. For death and aging, it's more complex. Some theories suggest aging is a kind of trade-off. Genes that provide benefits early in life, like increased reproductive success, might have detrimental effects later on, after reproduction is mostly stopped. And selection pressure is weaker then, so those late-acting negative effects stick around. Others consider aging might be a programmed process, though that's still quite controversial. But yeah, ultimately, these are massive evolutionary puzzles. Our best theories are still working to fully explain them. It's kind of like the dark matter of biology.
Okay, so if life right here on Earth is such a profound mystery, what about life elsewhere? The really big questions. Are we alone? And we've almost found it, haven't we? Or at least we thought we might have.
You're probably thinking of the Viking mission to Mars in 1976. That's a really powerful example of this scientific drama and our eagerness to find an answer. One experiment, Gilbert Levin's labeled release experiment on the Martian surface, actually showed a positive result. It indicated microbial metabolism was happening in the soil. Carl Sagan himself even initially congratulated Levin on discovering life beyond Earth. It was a huge moment.
But then they changed their minds. What was the reasoning for walking that back?
Yet, the official conclusion shifted. The primary reason was another experiment on Viking, the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, or GCMS. Its job was to look for organic material, the chemical building blocks of life as we know it, in the Martian soil. And it found nothing, no organics. So the mission leaders concluded there couldn't be life despite Levin's result. They hypothesized that maybe something highly reactive in the soil, like hydrogen peroxide, was destroying any organic compounds, including Levin's nutrient solution.
But wait, hydrogen peroxide wasn't definitively found in sufficient quantities, right? And wasn't it discovered later that the GCMS wasn't even sensitive enough to detect life if it was there at expected levels? That seems like a huge detail.
Precisely. That's the crux of the ongoing debate. It was later discovered that the GCMS sensitivity was several orders of magnitude lower than originally thought for organic molecules. In fact, subsequent tests showed that if you ran the Viking GCMS on highly active Antarctic soils here on Earth, soils known to contain microbes, it still wouldn't detect organic matter. Just wasn't sensitive enough. So Levin, while always cautious, still believes his experiment detected life. He's even proposed a new experiment using chiral molecules, molecules that exist in left-handed and right-handed mirror image forms. Life on Earth strongly favors one type, L-amino acids and D sugars. His idea is that detecting such a preference on Mars would be a really strong biosignature, distinguishing biological activity from just plain chemistry. The potential implications that we might have detected life decades ago and then effectively misinterpreted or ignored the data. They're quite profound.
So we might have found life on Mars and then essentially talked ourselves out of it for decades. That's incredible. It really makes you wonder what else we might be missing. What about intelligent life, though? Has ET already been in touch, maybe?
Well, this leads us straight to the famous WOW signal. This happened in 1977. The Big Ear telescope, which was part of the SETI program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, picked up this incredibly strong, very narrow band radio signal. And it was right around 1420 megahertz. Now, that specific frequency is significant because physicists Giuseppe Cocconi and Philip Morrison had predicted years earlier that it would be a logical hailing frequency for an alien civilization. Why? because it's linked to the natural emission frequency of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, a kind of universal marker.
Right. And the astronomer on duty, Jerry Eman, famously circled "wow" on the computer printout because it looked exactly like the kind of strong, narrowband, non-terrestrial signal they were specifically trained to look for.
It was, by all accounts, a perfect candidate for an extraterrestrial signal. It was strong, it was coherent, it wasn't drifting in frequency much, and it was at that theoretically significant hydrogen line frequency.
Right.
Yet, here's the anomaly. It lasted about 72 seconds, and then it was gone. And despite numerous attempts to rescan that same patch of sky, it has never ever been detected again. So if you apply Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is often the simplest explanation for a signal with those specific characteristics, if it wasn't some unknown natural phenomenon, is that it actually originated from an alien civilization. But without any replication, it remains this incredibly tantalizing, isolated mystery, a blip that makes you wonder.
Okay, so if such a compelling signal, even just one, was detected, why isn't SETI funded like other major science projects, given the absolutely staggering implications if they did find something conclusive?
That's a good question. The search for aliens, SETI, has faced really significant skepticism and, frankly, political opposition for decades. You had things like Senator Proxmire's Golden Fleece Awards back in the 70s, which publicly ridiculed government spending he considered wasteful. SETI was a prime target, and its NASA funding was eventually cut. It's often seen as a very long shot, maybe even fringe science by some. It's hard to justify to taxpayers when there are no immediate tangible results guaranteed. It requires immense patience. Yet the implications of not looking or not looking seriously are just as profound, aren't they? As Arthur C. Clarke famously put it, sometimes I think we're alone in the universe and sometimes I think we're not. In either case, the idea is quite staggering. Oh, wow. Signal, even as a one-off, remains this powerful reminder of what might be out there, just beyond our current reach or perhaps our current understanding.
Wow. Okay, so from the accelerating universe and the deep mysteries of dark matter and dark energy to the perplexing biological questions of life, death, and sex, and even a possible fleeting signal from an alien civilization. These are the kinds of scientific anomalies we've been diving into. They might seem like roadblocks, frustrating dead ends, but really they're actually portals to new understanding, aren't they?
Indeed, that's exactly the right way to look at it. These unsolved problems, these things that don't make sense yet, they are the very engines of scientific progress. They force us to question our most basic assumptions, to push the boundaries of our existing theories, sometimes even to break them. And ultimately, that's what leads us to the most profound discoveries. Think about it. The slight anomaly in Io's orbit around Jupiter helped Ole Romer prove the finite speed of light. Or Mercury's slightly odd orbit, another anomaly, was crucial evidence validating Einstein's theory of general relativity. These current anomalies, they hold the keys to future breakthroughs. They challenge us to expand our models and really rethink what we believe to be true about the universe.
It really is a testament to the human spirit of inquiry, isn't it? This relentless pursuit of answers, even when we're faced with the utterly inexplicable. We might not have all the answers right now, maybe we never will have all of them. But the joy, maybe the real point, is in the journey itself, in asking why and how, and just living with that exhilarating possibility that we're always on the cusp of truly redefining our place in the universe.
Absolutely. And as Michael Brooks, the author of our main source material, puts it so eloquently, the future of science depends on identifying the things that don't make sense. He says, our attempts to explain anomalies are exactly what drives science forward. We are constantly discovering just how much we don't know. And for anyone with a curious mind, that should be a truly exciting prospect, not a discouraging one.
So, thinking about everything we've touched on, what stands out to you from today's deep dive into the unexplained? Which anomaly makes you really stop and question everything you thought you knew? The universe is clearly still ripe for investigation, full of mysteries, and the next great discovery could be just around the corner, waiting for someone, maybe even you listening right now, to look at something baffling and just say, huh, that's funny, and then go on to change the world.